Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, June 8th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will see a high of 82.3 degrees and a low of 60.2 degrees. It's a beautiful day, so enjoy the sunshine, but remember to stay hydrated if you are spending time outdoors. Coming up on Alex's News, we will delve into the significant challenges many U.S. communities face as they attempt to rebuild stronger and more resiliently in the aftermath of devastating storms. We will also explore the specific factors that led to heightened security being implemented at the recent Boulder Jewish Festival. All this and more as Alex's News continues. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're starting off this morning with a crucial investigative report that truly digs into the deep end of disaster recovery. Joining us from our newsroom this morning is reporter Ethan Riley, who has been sifting through the details of this important investigation. Ethan, this report uncovers a significant problem in how our nation rebuilds after natural disasters. What's the core issue?
Grace, it's a real eye-opener. The investigation, titled Recovery Failure: Why We Struggle to Rebuild for the Next Storm, comes from a joint effort by NPR and the PBS series Frontline. What they've found, current as of today, June 8, 2025, is that despite the federal government allocating an average of $50 billion annually for disaster recovery, communities consistently fail to rebuild in a way that truly protects them from future natural hazards. It's a challenging cycle where immediate needs often take precedence over long-term resilience.
$50 billion is a staggering amount, yet it sounds like we're just treading water, not making waves in terms of long-term protection. Can you give us some specific examples of where this struggle to rebuild has played out?
Absolutely, Grace. The report points to several communities across the U.S. that have been hit hard. Areas like Houston, New York, and New Jersey, all of which have endured severe storms, are cited as places where rebuilding strategies have often fallen short in mitigating future damage. A particularly vivid example is western North Carolina following Hurricane Helene. The immediate pressure to reopen businesses and rehouse residents there frequently overshadowed crucial long-term resilience measures, such as building structures higher or strengthening infrastructure.
That sounds like a tough balancing act, short-term relief versus long-term resilience. Did the report identify any specific patterns in how communities attempt to recover?
It did, and it even gives a name to a fascinating phenomenon, the jack-o'-lantern effect. This describes the inconsistent recovery outcomes they observed. According to NPR and Frontline, some residents, utilizing recovery funds, managed to elevate their homes. Others accept government buyouts, leading to leveled properties. Yet still others undertake no protective measures at all. This creates a precarious, piecemeal vulnerability across affected areas, much like the unevenly carved features of a pumpkin.
That's quite a visual, the jack-o'-lantern effect. It sounds like there are many contributing factors to this ongoing vulnerability. What are some of the systemic issues highlighted by this extensive investigation?
Well, the report lays out several key themes. One is what disaster expert Brad Gare describes as a tremendous amount of inertia within the disaster recovery industry itself. It suggests a resistance to changing established practices. Another major issue is flawed flood maps and public awareness. A significant number of Americans live in flood-prone areas without being required to build flood-resistant homes, and many are simply unaware of their inherent risk. While the need for updated flood maps is acknowledged, formal revisions are often slow to materialize.
So we're stuck in old ways, and sometimes literally stuck in the mud, because people don't even realize they're at risk. Are there other systemic barriers making this problem worse, perhaps impacting certain populations more than others?
Unfortunately, yes. The investigation underlines how ingrained poverty, social inequality, and inadequate disaster insurance exacerbate vulnerability, especially in disproportionately affected communities. Poorer populations frequently reside in poorly constructed shelters in flood-susceptible zones and often have limited access to official disaster relief. Furthermore, according to NPR and Frontline, historical discriminatory housing practices like redlining have played a role in placing numerous communities of color in high flood risk areas, perpetuating these cycles of vulnerability.
That's deeply concerning. A cycle of vulnerability driven by historical and systemic inequities. What about government regulations and funding? Are they helping or hindering resilient rebuilding?
The report suggests they're more of a hindrance than a help in some respects. Convoluted federal regulations are identified as obstructing both immediate rebuilding efforts and the effective implementation of long-term resilient strategies. Historically, federal disaster relief programs have often mandated rebuilding to pre-damage conditions, rather than actively supporting the construction of stronger, more resilient infrastructure. This effectively means rebuilding back to what was vulnerable before.
It sounds like we're missing an opportunity to build smarter, not just build back. Is there any indication that special interests play a role in this cycle of vulnerability?
Yes, the report does touch on that, Grace. It suggests that certain special interests can financially benefit even when communities do not rebuild in a safer or more resilient manner. This creates a disincentive, if you will, for sound long-term planning. And we can't forget climate change, which the report emphasizes is an intensifying factor. The increasing frequency and severity of natural hazards simply makes the need for a more effective and resilient approach even more critical.
So, a perfect storm of factors, if you will, preventing us from truly weathering the next storm. Ethan, this has been an incredibly insightful dive into the Recovery Failure Report from NPR and the PBS series Frontline. We appreciate you bringing these vital details to our attention. Thank you, Ethan.
My pleasure, Grace. The report, widely disseminated through public radio networks like WLI-WFM on Long Island and KBRW Public Radio in Alaska, truly calls for a more holistic, equitable, and forward-thinking approach to disaster recovery.
Thank you, Ethan. We'll be right back with more after the break, including our second story of the morning. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our look at headlines making news this morning, and we turn now to a story out of Colorado that has certainly been a burning issue, figuratively and literally. The 30th annual Boulder Jewish Festival took place today, Saturday, June 8, 2025, under extraordinarily heightened security and with a reimagined focus on healing. This comes after a truly shocking and violent Molotov cocktail attack just 1 week prior at the very same location. Joining us now with the full details is our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, this sounds absolutely horrific. Can you walk us through what happened during that attack?
Grace, it was indeed a terrifying incident. The attack occurred on Sunday, June 1st, 2025, during a vigil that was organized by a group called, quote, Run for Their Lives, end quote. This is a global grassroots initiative that advocates for the release of Israeli hostages held in Gaza. The vigil was being held at the downtown Pearl Street Pedestrian Mall, which is the exact location for the Boulder Jewish Festival and is also near the Boulder Jewish Community Center. According to witnesses, people saw a large flame and individuals on fire. Law enforcement reported that the attacker yelled, quote, Free Palestine, end quote, as he allegedly threw Molotov cocktails at the demonstrators.
Unbelievable. And what do we know about the assailant, Chloe, and the charges he is now facing?
Well, the assailant was swiftly apprehended. He was identified as Mohammed Sabri Solomon, who is 45 years old and an Egyptian national reportedly living illegally in the United States. He has been charged with an astounding 118 counts in state court, Grace. These include attempted murder, assault, illegal use of explosives, and even animal cruelty, as a dog was also among the victims. In addition, Solomon faces a federal hate crime charge and is currently being held on a very substantial $10 million cash bond. According to law enforcement, as detailed by U.S. News and World Report, Solomon explicitly told police he was motivated by a desire, quote, to kill all Zionist people, end quote, and he expressed no remorse for his actions, stating he had planned the attack for a year. The FBI is investigating this incident as a, quote, targeted terror attack, end quote.
It truly sends shivers down your spine to hear that. How many people were injured in this heinous act, and what more can you tell us about the victims?
15 people and a dog were victimized in the attack, Grace. This included 8 women and 7 men, ranging in age from 25 to 88. Tragically, among them was even a Holocaust survivor. The violence unfolded at the very start of the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, adding another layer of distress to the community. Festival organizers, as reported by National Public Radio, have called this, quote, the most violent anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Colorado history, end quote. It was a truly profound shock to the community.
Given such a horrific prelude, how did the Boulder Jewish Festival move forward, and what was its renewed purpose?
In response to this unprecedented attack, the Boulder Jewish Festival was significantly, quote, reimagined, end quote. Its focus shifted to centering on community healing, resilience, and solidarity. The, quote, Run for Their Lives, end quote, group, which was the direct target of the attack, was featured, quote, front and center, end quote, at the festival. This global grassroots movement began in October 2023 after Hamas's attack on Israel, and it aims to raise awareness for the estimated 55 Israeli hostages still believed to be in captivity in Gaza. Families of Israeli hostages were expected to join the festival, with Moshe Emilio Lavi, whose brother-in-law Omri Moran was kidnapped by Hamas, scheduled to speak. While the festival maintained elements of art, food, and music, it also included poignant tributes to the victims and provided crucial mental health resources and trauma support. It became a beacon of resilience.
That's a powerful transformation. And with such a focus on safety, what kind of enhanced security measures were in place at the festival?
Security was significantly heightened at the festival, Grace, as well as at local synagogues and the Boulder Jewish Community Center. The Boulder Police Department and the FBI, coordinating closely with Jewish Colorado's Secure Community Network, implemented rigorous protocols. Attendees could expect a very visible law enforcement presence, including drones, SWAT elements, and even plainclothes officers. These measures were purely precautionary, not based on any new specific threat, but rather aimed at deterring potential attackers and ensuring community safety after such a traumatic event. They were definitely taking no chances.
And Chloe, there's another fascinating development tied to this case involving Solomon's family and their immigration status. Can you shed some light on that?
Absolutely, Grace. Following Mohammed Sabri Solomon's arrest, his wife, Hayam El Gamal, and their 5 children, who are also Egyptian nationals aged 4 to 18, were taken into U.S. immigration custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. The stated intention was to process them for removal from the U.S. However, U.S. District Judge Gordon P. Gallagher intervened, issuing a temporary restraining order on Wednesday, June 4 or 5, 2025, that temporarily blocked their deportation. Judge Gallagher's ruling, as uncovered by ABC News, was based on the need to protect the family's constitutional rights and prevent, quote, irreparable harm, end quote, from deportation without due process. Attorneys for El Gamal and her children filed an emergency habeas corpus application, arguing that it is, quote, patently unlawful to punish individuals for the crimes of their relatives, end quote, and that such, quote, collective punishment, end quote, violates, quote, the very foundations of a democratic justice system, end quote. The judge's order temporarily restrains federal immigration authorities from removing the family from Colorado or the United States pending a hearing scheduled for June 13, 2025, which is just 5 days from today.
That's a complex legal battle unfolding. Is it common for entire families to be detained and face expedited removal based on one member's alleged actions without individual charges?
Not at all, Grace. Legal experts consider it quite rare for entire families to be detained and threatened with expedited removal solely based on one member's alleged actions without individual charges against them. It really emphasizes the due process concerns in this case. It is important to note that El Gamal and her children have not been charged with any crime in connection with the attack. While DHS officials are investigating the extent of the family's knowledge, Solomon himself stated he had not discussed his plans with them, and his wife reportedly cooperated by turning over a phone he had left with messages for his family. Regarding Solomon's own immigration status, he arrived in the U.S. on a temporary visa in August 2022, which expired in February 2023. He had filed for asylum in September 2022, also with expired work authorization. So this situation really highlights the tension between U.S. immigration enforcement priorities, due process rights, humanitarian concerns, and potential asylum claims.
Thank you, Chloe, for that incredibly detailed and important update. It sounds like the community is really rallying together after such a dark incident.
They truly are, Grace. In a broader community response, Jewish Colorado launched an emergency fund to support the victims and enhance community safety, including festival security. A community vigil was also held earlier in the week at the Boulder Jewish Community Center. Festival organizers and community members underscored the importance of continuing with the event as an act of resilience and solidarity in the face of violence and anti-Semitism. It is a powerful message of unity.
Chloe, thank you for providing such a thorough and comprehensive report on this difficult story. We appreciate you keeping us updated.
My pleasure, Grace.
We'll be keeping a close eye on the developments, particularly that hearing coming up next week. We'll be back with more news after the break. Here are some other headlines. Down in Chile, there's a rather fishy situation brewing as indigenous fishermen, particularly the Kawascar people, say the nation's booming salmon industry is threatening their ancient way of life. They argue these farmed, non-native salmon are quite literally muddying the waters of the Patagonian fjords with antibiotics, chemicals, and waste, leading to oxygen-depleting algal blooms. The industry's pontoons and lights also disrupt habitats, impacting species like humpback whales and endemic Chilean dolphins. Kawascar leader Leticia Caro describes the impact as ethnocide, eroding their culture and access to ancestral fishing grounds. One farm even floats directly below where a leader was born. While some indigenous people work in the industry, it's reportedly created rifts. This isn't small fry. Chile is the world's second-largest salmon producer, a multi-billion-dollar export. Controversy swirls around hundreds of farm concessions in supposedly protected areas, prompting legal battles and calls to freeze new permits. The Lafkentia law, meant to protect indigenous coastal rights, is also a point of contention, with some indigenous claims recently denied, much to the salmon industry's relief. It's a classic tale of economic tides versus cultural heritage, with indigenous communities asserting they were never properly consulted. From the ocean's depths to the depths of human emotion, Britpop fans are getting more than they hoped for. Pulp, fronted by the iconic Jarvis Cocker, is back after a 2-decade break, with a new album, reportedly titled More, their first in 24 years. The album title hints they'll be serving up their signature lyrical cocktail: death, love, sex, mistakes, marriage, all explored with that familiar, witty, bittersweet, and perhaps, as Cocker admits, slightly inappropriate candor. NPR's Ann Powers dubbed Pulp the wittiest, bitterest star in the Britpop constellation, and notes that on this new album, Cocker is learning to trust his feelings. Having formed the band in Sheffield in 1978, Cocker says he's applying their old formula to a new phase of life. It seems these common people are ready to make some rather uncommon waves once again. And speaking of making waves, Broadway is abuzz as the 78th Annual Tony Awards are set to dazzle tonight, Sunday, June 8th. The main curtain rises at 8 p.m. Eastern on CBS and Paramount Plus with Showtime. Paramount Plus Essential folks can catch it on demand tomorrow. For early birds, the pre-show, the Tony Awards Act 1, streams free on Pluto TV from 6:40 p.m. Eastern. Hosted by the talented Cynthia Erivo at Radio City Music Hall, with Darren Criss and Renee Elise Goldsberry warming up the pre-show crowd, and Brian Stokes Mitchell announcing it promises a night of spectacle. Expect performances from nominated musicals like Buena Vista Social Club, Death Becomes Her, and maybe Happy Ending, which all lead with 10 nods. Plus, a special Hamilton original cast reunion for its 10th anniversary. You won't want to be out of the room where it happens for that. Notable nominees include the legendary Audra McDonald seeking her 11th Tony, alongside stars like George Clooney, Daniel Day Kim, Mia Farrow, and Sarah Snook. A galaxy of stars will present, and special honors go to Harvey Fierstein for Lifetime Achievement and Celia Keenan-Bolger with the Isabel Stevenson Award. It's shaping up to be a dramatically good time. Finally, a long tenure is coming to a close in Tennessee, but not without some serious questions. Richard L. Bean, the 84-year-old superintendent of the Knox County Juvenile Detention Center that ironically bears his name, is retiring August 1st. Bean, who's held the post since 1972, stepped down after local officials declared a, quote, loss of confidence. The center has faced accusations of illegally using solitary confinement as punishment, practices being defended, even wishing for more punitive abilities. Renewed scrutiny came after he dismissed 2 employees, including a nurse who reported significant medical care issues like missing medication and incorrect reporting. They were later reinstated after intervention from Knox County's mayor and a judge. Critics, including state lawmakers, described a, quote, culture of lawlessness under Bean, who, despite failed state inspections, reportedly felt immune to state rules. He held on to power for decades, allegedly thanks to a, quote, rubber stamp board of close allies and lax state oversight from the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. The final act came when Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs publicly lost confidence, calling for the sheriff's office to take over and urging state intervention. It seems the beans have finally been spilled, and a new chapter is set to begin for the facility. And that's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.